Wednesday, January 26th. A day that likely will not live in infamy. I mean, we will forget the exact date, right? But a day today where we discuss some of the most monumental news that I think I've ever discussed on the radio, at least from a local radio standpoint, right, Jake? Like, for like what we do, right? We are supposed to be local. So we talk about LSU, we talk about the Saints all the time. We talk about Pelicans even with a bit of a smattering. And every now and then we'll dip our toe in the national waters for the biggest stories, NFL playoffs and whatnot. But mainly, we are here and you are here because you like to hear about your favorite teams. And the pillar of this show and everything else really here on the station are the LSU Tiger football team and then the New Orleans Saints football team. And yesterday, Sean Payton announced that he is stepping away from being the head coach of the New Orleans Saints. And it's crazy, Jake, because I was thinking about this. Yeah, I'm 33 years old, but to me, and in a lot of ways, functionally, this is the case. Sean Payton has been the coach of the New Orleans Saints for my entire life. Like, I know that's not true, right? But, I mean, when you think about your kind of real life beginning or when you really lived your formative years, right, figuring yourself out post-high school into adulthood, into fatherhood, all of these things, one of the constant backdrops in those formative years has been Sean Payton and the New Orleans Saints, right? Sean Payton as the leader of the New Orleans Saints. Sean Payton keeping the Saints relative, even with an ugly middle portion, right? Had it, lost it, got it back again. And yesterday, that all came to an end. And the different directions that you can go with this conversation are wide-ranging and crazy. You can go emotional. You can go logical. You can really frame it however you want. But at the end of the day, after listening to that 2-hour press conference yesterday, which was absolutely fantastic, I do find myself very thankful. Right? I don't know what the future holds, but on this day, this Wednesday, January 26th, a date which we will forget, though not the event, I find myself very thankful for everything that Sean Payton has given this city, this state, for how much fun it has been to watch a team and an organization that exuded competence, confidence, and consistency. 3 things that are ever elusive in the NFL and that everybody wants. So as you can tell, we're going to get deep into Sean Payton today. You got Shanley showing up, Will Clapp. Like, how funny is Clapp's perspective? Growing up a New Orleans kid, like literally as a kid watching these teams during his formative years and then going on to play for the guy. And who knows, maybe in talking to some of these guys, we'll find that he's been over deified or under. Like, I don't know, but the press conference was fantastic. The era of football was fantastic. And today, we're going to celebrate, make it a little sad, maybe some anger mixed in from some of y'all as well. That always makes sense when you walk away. But Sean Payton moving on. Jake, sorry, I know that was very long-winded. No. What's up, man? How you doing today?
No, and I agree with you because what he did when he took over in 2006, I mean, outside of your Pops and that those teams making a run to the postseason in the NFC West, like there wasn't anything to really hang your hat on as a Saints fan.
Yeah.
Like you just didn't have it. I mean, it was a franchise that had never won, right? And you'll get your first playoff victory there against the Rams with Haslett, but it's like that wasn't sustained. And then here comes Sean Payton at the darkest time of the franchise history.
It's true.
2005. I mean, we all know Hurricane Katrina, what that did to the franchise. And I think most of us listening went to the games that were in Tiger Stadium and that feeling like, is this going to be, our team moving forward? Is this team going to move? Are they going to San Antonio?
Yeah.
Right. So you didn't know where the franchise was even going to go. And then here comes Sean Payton and you start to win like immediately, right? You're going to NFC championship games and then you turn yourself into a playoff contender and then you turn yourself into a Super Bowl contender and then you sustain it over a very long period of time. Like with Sean Payton, you never felt like the Saints were ever going to be out of it. Even when they were 7-9 in those seasons, you can point to moments that, man, if this play goes this way, they get a chance to win 10 games maybe. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah.
Even this year.
And they never went worse than 7-9.
No, and for the Saints franchise, I mean, that's a big deal from where they were before he got there. Even in this season, his last season as the Saints coach, it's a bad roster after all the injuries. Certainly offensively it was. Defensively, the roster's great, but you had injuries on the defensive side. It was not a roster that should have had a chance the last game of the season to make the postseason. But you had Sean Payton. I think all the fans just always believed that they were going to make the postseason. They made their run. They actually did their part. And obviously they needed some help, and there's a couple of games we could point to, like, man, you wish they had that game, but whatever. They found a way. They figured out Tom Brady and the Buccaneers.
Yeah.
It's just all the things they did this year with the roster that they had shows you what kind of coach Sean Payton is. And, yeah, it's a very sad day. Like, even for me, who grew up a Saints fan, loved the Saints, and kind of went away as I played for other teams, like, I still appreciate what Sean Payton was able to do and will always appreciate what he was able to do with the Saints. And he's one of the top 3 coaches in the NFL. So, you're going to be sad, like you mentioned, a lot of emotions. You're going to be sad. You're going to be glad that it happened. You're going to probably at some point get angry that he's not going to be the coach. And then you're going to be excited / nervous about who's potentially going to take over. And I know we're not going to really get into that today, and maybe we'll for a short period of time, because it's not about that today. It's about Sean Payton and what he did for New Orleans. But there's a lot of emotions that are going to happen today.
Yeah, and it's scary. That's one of I think fear is one of the big emotions here for everything that you just said, because outside of Peyton, the vast majority of Saints history is just that black hole, right? So it's almost like you were living in the dark ages. Medicine is backwards. We're like, she weighed more than a duck. She's a witch. Burn her. And then there's this enlightened individual descends from the heavens, and he kind of rockets civilization along. And as long as he is king, times are good. Can you follow up on that golden leader? Y'all know I love the Hardcore History podcast by Dan Carlin. He always talks about this. A lot of times a monarchical government, so a government with a king or a queen, it can be like it's a roll of the dice. And when it hits, you get a golden age, like a Queen Elizabeth or something, right? It hits, everything is awesome. Your society improves. But when you miss, well, you can go back to the dark ages, right? And that's what I think Saints fans are fearing, are that civilizational step backwards. Now, what we'll talk about is I think there's some key elements in place that can help to prevent that. And depending on how optimistic of an individual you are, you can kind of paint a lot of the future how you want. It was pretty amazing, man, listening to him talk yesterday, Jake, where, well, there's actually an LSU tie that I think is very important to talk about. But if you're ever feeling like your franchise is screwed and you're never going to be able to get back up, or you're like miles away from getting back up. Now, clearly, the main piece is just finding a quarterback, right? Look at Cincinnati. Look what Drew Brees did here. But when he goes through the 2006 draft and the free agent signings and bringing in Semino and Shanley and all of these other guys, like it's pretty shocking in how quickly they were able to completely re-engineer things from top to bottom and become relevant and become a winner. And one of the ways they did that is a word that got memed after the Brian Kelly conference. And he literally said the word. Sean Payton, what's led to the consistent success here is that the power structure, the hierarchy, we have always been in alignment. Remember, everybody was clowning that when Woodward and Kelly, I mean, they said it a lot, so I get it. I'm not saying like people were like, oh, there's negative. No, like, but they were like, it was funny. They said alignment a lot. But that's exactly what Sean Payton said yesterday. He talked about the vision, right? The overall goal, and not that they were always in concert with one another, right? Not that they always agreed, but they always knew what the end goal was, and they compromised. One time, this side may give, the other time this side may give, but they were aligned in their goals and how to reach their goals, and that sort of organizational philosophy. I don't think it's by accident, Jake, that it pops up with someone as sharp as Brian Kelly and as sharp as Sean Payton, right?
Yeah.
Like that shows you why Woodward's pitch to Kelly was so strong, and why this next era of LSU football may be setting themselves up for consistent, sustained success. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, and going back to the Saints in that 06 season, you're talking about, being aligned and all having the same common goal, and there was so many things that they had to do, and they had to get them all right, and they did. Like, they went out, and you talked about the linebackers. Like, you throw out some names, Semino. Like, I hadn't thought about that name in a very long time, but that's what you did.
Fujita.
Yeah, Fujita, and you get Scott to come over. Like, you took a chance on some of those veteran linebackers. You actually take a huge chance on Drew Brees and get him to become a Saint, obviously, after the injury he had in San Diego. And you also, like, when you look at that draft, like, it kind of fell to you, but you got Reggie Bush, obviously, like a lot of debate. Everybody thought he was going to go number 1 overall. You get Reggie. You get Roman Harper.
Real quick on Bush, I love this little nugget. How about Peyton talking about traveling around selling season tickets, like literally having to beat the street to sell tickets? They draft Reggie Bush, sold out.
Yeah.
You want to talk about impact, like the NIL impact of what Reggie Bush was, like straight up sold out the Saints just because you drafted him.
I mean, I remember being elated whenever the Texans decided they weren't going to select Reggie Bush. I mean, he was the most exciting college football player that I think I'd ever seen, like in my time, right? So you get a Reggie Bush, you get a Roman Harper in the second round, you get Jairi Evans in the fourth round,
Hall of Famer.
You get Zach Strief in the seventh round, you get Marcus Colston in the seventh round.
Compensatory.
I mean, it's
so season ticket holder since 04. The first banner I ever saw got hung was 06 when they sold out season tickets. It was the first time they'd ever done that. And now the banner's still there, but it has all the years that they've sold out the season tickets since then.
And I don't know where it stands right now, boys, but at its height, wasn't there like a multi-year wait list to get on the season tickets?
Oh, yeah. Like 50,000 people or more.
Yeah, and I know that it's still some wait list right now, but I didn't really realize that, Mark, because we've always thought of the New Orleans fan base being loyal even in the bad times. And granted, it was a different era of football maybe back in the day. Maybe people didn't buy season tickets as much and all of these different factors, right? But that's pretty wild there that they had never done that pre-06, and that now it would take you multiple years of like trying to get on that list to get your hands on some. That's changing the culture. And was one of the kind of themes of yesterday, is that's what they had to do. They had to remake that culture. I guess the question now becomes, as we start to look forward to kind of what comes next, what do y'all think? Can culture change transcend, extend past the individual that was at the core of that culture change? What happens when the captain of the ship passes on the reins?
Yeah. It's tough because if you still had Drew in place, if you still had some of the older heads in place, maybe you can keep it kind of like it was. But now, do you want to keep it like it was? Because you don't have the people that built it to what it was. And so do you want people trying to copy what was built before? Because there's way more than just one way to win football games and have a great organization. So do you completely hit reset? Do you try to, keep a Dennis Allen because he knows Sean's way and try to keep that going? Like, there's a lot of what ifs that can kind of come into the situation.
A lot of what ifs. Sports fans saying, what about Vilma? Well, Vilma came after the 06 season, right? When did they sign him?
Like
08? 08?
Yeah.
But obviously, yes, Jonathan Vilma. The Jets love giving the Saints elite linebackers.
I'm trying to think.
Shout out to
No, that 06 class is the best up there with 17. You had Strief, you had Reggie Bush, you had Marcus Colston.
So that's the real key.
Oh, you had
just have a generational draft.
You also had Rob
Ninkovich.
Yeah.
Which actually,
he was in that as well.
That is really funny because Peyton was like, it's literally one of the biggest regrets of his career.
Oh,
like they don't think about Ninkovich that much, and he kept talking about it yesterday. He actually literally called it one of the biggest misses of his entire career. That he cut Ninkovich, Ninkovich came back, and he said, look, we can make you into like a deep snapper.
Yeah.
I think the fact Belichick got him and utilized him better bothers him a little bit more, too.
It absolutely bothers him. But also because he styled himself in the ways of Belichick. Actually, let's go ahead and play the Belichick clip here. This is pretty cool. This is a young coach who just takes over and is trying to figure out, okay, how do I make this thing work?
With all due respect, and I mean that, when we got here, who's doing this better than anyone? And if you weren't studying New England, then you weren't paying attention. So anytime Bill would say or ask, would you like to practice? Yes. And then when you were practicing, you were kind of like, can we come in? Like, what do you mean? Can I look at your locker room? Can we look at your weight room? We want to learn.
That's really cool, man. To think about a young kind of Ernest Payton trying to sneak in and just see how the Patriots do things and learn. And that was one of the other themes from yesterday's wide-ranging 2-hour press conference was everything that Sean Payton does in this job, he views it through the lens of a teacher. Like, that's what he is. And it sounds dumb because maybe that is what coaching is, right? And I guess we've all kind of known that on some level, but I feel like a lot of coaches don't always directly address that. And so to hear him and how he viewed himself and really the feeling that he loved the most being this feeling that a teacher gets when you teach your students something and then you see that something applied into action. He described that as the greatest feeling and the thing that he will miss the most. You're losing a very wise teacher here. And the question is who can fill those shoes?
He was a big studier and wanted to gather all the information from any coach that he thought had something good. I can remember when I was in camp with him, he's like, hey, is Norv still running 878 on those 3rd and longs? It's just like, it's like, oh, you're with Norv? It's like, oh, man, we talk offense all the time. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Wow.
he wasn't afraid to, like, hey, what y'all got going on? Hey, I like that. Well, what are y'all doing there in that situation? And if you would go, like, where we're going next week to Mobile, you would always see him sitting in the stands, and it wouldn't necessarily be with other Saint coaches. It would be with, like, Jason Garrett or Norv or Mike Zimmer, who, like, he was always talking to somebody else. And in my mind, he was always trying to pick their brain.
Yeah.
Like, even if he's a better coach than all those people, like, okay, I like what you do in here.
Yeah, you never have too much pride to learn.
No, not at all. And I felt like that was him. So, Mike Zimmer, like double A-gap mugs, like he was the king of it. I'm sure, like, hey, when do you call that? Tell me about that. Even defensive stuff.
I'm excited to talk to Flynn about double A-gap mugs. I saw him lamenting it in the Niners loss.
It's the hardest
other
thing
day.
to stop.
I hated it. Yeah, I agree. All right, when we get back here, let's start to explore this idea a little bit of what comes next for the New Orleans Saints. Keep it locked right here on Off the Bench.